Okay, well, thank you so much for being here, Nick and Michelle. And we're waiting on one other person. Hopefully, she'll make it. But today it's not really over the panel. This is the third time I've been doing this. My name's Kenzie Dolan. I'm a certified professional astrologer and a grief walker. Grief walker is something that I learned through Stephen Jenkinson, who is a really profound member in the death work field, community, whatever you want to call it. He's also been called the angel of death, but he has a very um, interesting perspective on death. He believes that, societies like the United States really shy away from death, and I couldn't agree more. So in 2022, I created a course called It's Not Really Over. And it's a course around death, dying, grieving, and learning about the afterlife. And the thought behind the whole course was to create a course for people that were grieving a loved one, particularly a human. I mean, it also was for a pet as well. And the reason why I created the course was because in December of 2018, I lost my first dog I've ever had in this lifetime. His name was Cash. He was with our family for 15 and a half years, and he had a gruesome death. He actually fell and paralyzed himself, and so we actually needed to have a vet come to our house to put him down. And we were told by the vet, who went to Mizzou, which was my alma mater, that he was at a level 10. And I told my mom a long time ago, when I left St. Louis and moved to New York, that if Cash were to ever get sick, to let me know a couple days before so I could fly home and be with him. And so that's what happened. I was able to be there with Cash when he passed away. And it was really a special moment, where my mother was there, my father, and my little brother, and me. And those were Cash's four greatest caretakers. Very spoiled black lab. But he was a really special part to our family. And that was really difficult to lose him. If I felt like I was saying goodbye to a part of my life, my childhood, because at the time we had gotten Cash when I was in fourth grade, and I was like going on 27, I believe, or I had just turned 27. So fast forward to February of 2019, I got a call from my older sister, and she was distraught. And it was very unlike her. She's typically the sister or the daughter that keeps it really together. And so when I picked up the phone and I knew that something was wrong through her voice, she let me know that she had gone to a doctor's appointment and that the doctors predicted that her first son was not going to make it to full term. And she was just going in for the checkup to find out the sex of the baby. They could verify that it was a male, but they also verified that there was certain organs missing. And at that point in the pregnancy, they should have been developed. So from February to June, we as a family were grieving Fitz because we knew that he was not going to make it. I mean, of course, we were hoping that there was going to be some type of miracle, but he was supposed to be due July 4th, and he came a month early. And so on June 7th, 2019, Fitz was born, and he lived one full hour and then passed away shortly after. Um, what's interesting, and I don't think a lot of people realize this, but Cash's birthday was on July 4th, and Fitz's due date was on July 4th. So that date in particular holds a lot of significance for me. But in general, like, uh, it was really difficult to grieve both of those deaths simultaneously. I felt like I was lost in the grieving process. Um, it was real difficult. And so luckily, I had a friend who reached out to me who had taken an astrology course while she was going through chemotherapy. And she's my age, and we were all-star cheerleaders together. And she reached out to me and she said, "Hey, um, I just took this course. I know in middle school we used to talk about astrology. I feel like, you would really enjoy this." And so she had no idea that I had lost um, Fitz and Cash, but for some reason she had reached out to me probably in the darkest time of my grieving period. At the time, it was real dark. I was not feeling well at all, and I really needed something because I'm not a religious person. So I started to get certified as an astrologer, and I worked with Rebecca Gordon, who actually lost her mother at a young age and was able to really kind of connect the dots and look at things in a unique way. And that journey of being certified actually led me to Natalia Benson, who is another astrologer. And when I was in her course, which is how I met Michelle, who's on the call, Conscious Babe Business School, through Rebecca and Natalia, it was just shown in my natal chart that I have this gift of guiding people through the grieving process. And really, like, I have felt really drawn to death and processing death at a very young age. Jessica, that's on the call, has known me since high school, and we definitely have had to say goodbye to some friends. We've had to watch some people go through some really difficult times in high school. Both of us also like have had our own journeys of just having intrusive thoughts. So I just feel like at an early age, Jessica and I really understood what being death positive meant. And so I created this course in hopes of helping people that are still living, that are grieving somebody that's passed away. And today we're meeting on September 18th. And 21 years ago, my paternal grandmother, Virginia, lost her battle to breast cancer, which, to be honest with you, I was so young. I was 11 when I lost both of my grandmothers, and Virginia was the second one that I lost. The first one I lost actually on my 11th birthday. I didn't really understand what breast cancer was, and last year I went through a health scare where I also like went through kind of the process of finding out if I had something that was, uh, something that was like scary, but luckily it's benign. But just going through that, I truly understand what my grandmother had to go through and what people that battle breast cancer have to go through. So I'm really happy to honor her today. And I am going to go ahead and pass it over to Nick. Nick is our first panelist. Nick is a person that I met through my mom. My mom and Nick played tennis together at the club that I used to swim at. And I remember my mom came home from tennis practice, and this was when I was in Missouri getting a second opinion on the suspicious mass that I found in my breast last year. And she's like, "I met this person, or I've been talking to this person, and I really feel like it could be a good fit for your course. Would you like me to connect you both?" And I said, "Sure." And so we got on the call and we started talking, and Nick had this really interesting perspective on death. And we just started to really kind of jive. And so I'm really excited for him to share his story on death. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Nick.
Hi, I'm Nick Peters, retired from the communication industry after 30 years, and now my passion is tennis and woodworking. I do a lot of custom pieces for people, cabinets, tables, just about anything. And tonight I'm honoring my wife, Idris. And I'll just get into it. We had been married several years and had a boy and a girl. And as the family grew, just, I don't know how it developed, but something would be going on either in family and friends, nothing in the world, but people close to us. And she would tell me about it, and I'd say, yeah, it'll be okay. I just had a gut feeling, a sense, as I've been told. And sometimes it was, well, it's going to be tough. They'll get through it, but they're going to have, they're going to have to work at it. And sometimes I got nothing. And then my wife finally said one day, "How do you know this?" I said, "I don't know. It's a gut feeling. Something comes on me and I kind of think this is what it's going to do." And I was pretty much almost batting 1,000 with it. So actually one night her father had passed, and her mom was in a nursing home recuperating, and they were trying to get her strength up. And my wife turned to me one night and she said, "Honey, is mom ever going to come home from that nursing home?" And man, I knew. And I closed my eyes, I made sure, and I looked at her. I said, "I'm sorry, babe, but no." And it was a matter of weeks later, she had a heart attack and died. So as things came up, for an instance, my daughter got cancer of the breast, and she was obviously upset, but I just had a calm, and I told her it's going to be okay. And she looked, and I shook my head. Yeah, my guts say it's going to be okay. She's 18 years now, cancer free. They took the tumor out, and we went down to visit her. And from there, she's in Mobile, Alabama. We were going to go to Atlanta to plan a vacation trip with our friends in the fall. And I went with my son-in-law to his work one day, and he has his own sandwich shop, and my daughter and my wife and the grandbaby went shopping. And we got back to the house and we waiting on him, and the phone rings, and it's my daughter. And she said, "We've been in an accident." But I missed a big piece. When I was home one night, weeks before that, a sense rolled over me, and I knew. I snapped my head, looked at the front door, because I knew that doorbell was going to ring. There would be a policeman there, and he would tell me that she had been in an auto accident and died. That happened about 3 times before we made that trip. And every time I'd hear the garage door going up, and I'd go run, rinse my face, and she'd say, "Are you okay?" I said, "It's just allergies." Because I'm thinking, based on history, she's going to freak if I tell her this. And it could be the cause of the accident. But no. So we got up to where they were, and I saw the car, and I knew that's it. And they medevaced her, helicopter to the hospital. She arrested twice in the helicopter, once in the ER, and she never woke up. So I notified my son, and he was going to fly in. He said he was going to fly to Atlanta. They wouldn't let me drive, so my friends and that we were going to see and met us halfway. And my buddy, he drove my car, or my daughter had been driving it, our car rather. When we got to their house, I got out of that car and I just walked straight up, went in the house, the door into the house from the garage, through the kitchen, through the eating area, and stood at the window in the great room. And they came up and said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "She's here. I can feel her. She is here." And I don't know if they were giving it the spinning wheel behind my head or what, but they, and I just knew. I was looking, hopefully I'd see some sign, but no. So my son got in, we went back home. And I tell people like Kenzie, we were numbers people, meaning we all have our number. Don't care who you are, how important you are, or you think you are, how much money you had. When your number comes up, you're going. And she had just proved that theory beyond any doubt in my mind. And so what we had prepared, wills, powers of attorney, medical directives, and she had made a list of all her jewelry. I always tried to buy her, not every year, but pretty close, something nice to wear. And she made a list. If something happens to me, we had planned, this one gets this piece, this one gets that piece. So my son had left to go pick up his wife and my grandkids because they were out of town. And I thought, I need to start gathering that stuff because everybody's going to be coming in and I need to get this out. So I go in there and I look in the jewelry box. Yeah, I got this. I can't find one ring. So I go down to the safe where I had put in the basement, or I had put the bag of jewelry from the hospital. And I look in there, it's not there. I go back up, look again, and she had this one necklace that hung down, really far. But I had kind of moved that around, and it's not in there. Go back down into the, thinking it fell out of the bag. Look, no. I got to the stairway, did an about face, sat down and lost it. Because I was failing her. And I said, "Babe, I can't find that ring. I just can't find that ring. I can't believe someone at the hospital stole your ring." In my head, jewelry box. I said, "I looked in the jewelry box twice. I looked in the safe twice." I said, "I've defined and proven Einstein's theory on insanity, doing the same thing over and over, hoping for a different result or thinking it's going to be a different result." Jewelry box, fine. Go up there, look. Nope. Look some more. And then my head turns and my eyes are drawn to that necklace in the corner. And my hand reaches out, takes the chain. And there was the ring underneath it. So that was an ordeal, having that stuff out. And I was sitting like after that, everybody's gone. She's been laid to rest. And I'm sitting there like I'm sitting here. And I'm notifying people, taking care of business. And I feel right down my arm and over my fingertips. And I look, nothing there. But then bang in my head, ethereal. I think, well, I've read that. I read a lot of novels, and I thought, that's that kind of weird, eerie stuff. So I look it up on my phone. And the strange thing was, it didn't come up as a list, Wikipedia, Webster's, all that. It comes up with just a definition that says a touch so light or soft so as to be not of this world, semicolon, otherworldly. And I have looked that up, and then when I do it now, I get all the different places you can get the information. I have never, ever found that exact definition again. And that touch, the only thing I can compare it to is if you're laying in the sun and you're getting cooked and a cloud goes over and I don't know if it happened, but you can feel the shadow moving across your skin. But it was not quite that light, but it was a definite touch. And then that definition. And so I'll bring this full circle because a few weeks later, I'm sitting there and the doorbell rings at night. And I go out, open the door, and there's a policeman. And I resisted the temptation of saying, where you been? Or you're late, you're too late. But he says, are you so-and-so? I said, yeah. He says, do you know so-and-so? I says, yes, I do. And he says, well, he died. And we got a call from the McLean County coroner, because your number was the only number he had. And it was my wife's brother, my brother-in-law. And he was 2 years younger than her at the time. And I was hoping maybe someone would have an idea of what came through. The policeman showed up, but he didn't tell me it was my wife. My wife did get killed in an auto accident. And he showed up to tell me my brother-in-law died after that. And my daughter asked me, God, forget, she's been gone 17 years. Asked me a few years past that, she said, you ever get that gut thing? I said, nope. I think she took it with her. Because I get nothing. I got nothing. The light's out there. So that was it. Except I got thinking about it. And the thought that came into my head, that touch, was she was telling me, you'll be okay now, honey, and it's time for me to go. And that was it. It's still hard. I've talked with a lot of people. I've mentored a lot of people that have lost them. But the one thing I know, and I tell them, is you'll never get over it. You'll get through it. And then you'll get through it again and again and again. But you'll never get over it completely. I appreciate your time, and I thank you.
Thank you so much, Nick. That was so well spoken. And I feel like in your share, you really touched on the afterlife, where you had this connection with your spouse after she had passed. And we have talked about the six clairs, and you were talking about how you had gut feelings. So clairsentience, claircognizance, which is clear knowing. So yeah, it's really interesting that you share all of that. And I think your story is going to help people realize, when people do pass, it's not really over, that you can still actually have a relationship with the person on the spirit world. And your story is you're so confident that I know that what you're sharing is 100% real.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Michelle. So Michelle and I went through a similar business program with Natalia Benson, who actually just unfortunately lost her father. Michelle has also lost her father, and I have attended a grief circle of Michelle's. Michelle, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to you. Please introduce yourself and what you do, and you can take it away with whatever story you would like to share tonight.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle. Like Kenzie said, we met a couple of years ago in a spiritual business container, and I'm a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and also a peer grief counselor. So I work with a lot of people, a lot of their nutrition, but even within that, a lot of that has to do with emotions and emotional regulation, and tending to that part of themselves as well, because I believe that we have a mind, body, soul ecosystem that all influences each other. And grief, unfortunately, and kind of, I guess, obviously, once you experience grief, like really can disrupt that ecosystem. And I experienced that firsthand, which had led me to my own personal journey with grief, and then kind of my path in, talking more about grief, doing some group counseling, and kind of just learning more about how to support grievers. So yeah, I want to dedicate this to anyone who is grieving, and especially specifically young adults losing a parent, and specifically over kind of like a course of time, because that's such a taxing experience. It's like, some call it anticipatory grief. I call that, I think there's different words for it, but it's kind of another level of a different type. I don't think it's the same as grief, but it's exhausting. And then to be faced with grief, it's just a very trying period of life. So I'll dedicate this to that, to those people. Yeah, so I guess I could say, before my dad passed, I never really thought too much about grief. I think, I lost my grandparents when I was younger, my grandmas. And of course that was upsetting. I think, it nothing kind of took me out though, the way that this experience with my dad did. I think I was 26 or 27 when he got sick, but was fairly a healthy man. Maybe I think he was 60 or 59. And yeah, so I think there was a lot of different kind of levels that came with that loss, because when you start to see someone in your life who is a strong person, is kind of the epitome of that. fortunately for me, having a dad like him, it can really, it right from the get-go there can kind of make you start questioning life. Like, why does this happen, right? Things happen to other people but not us, and that kind of thinking. And unfortunately, it sounds so selfish, but that's kind of how a lot of our human brains are. So I think there was a lot of loss within that journey with the healthcare system, with just false hope going through. If anyone is familiar with like any kind of like cancer, there could be a lot of highs and lows and an emotional roller coaster. So I think that journey was really taxing, especially kind of being told like, this is the best cancer you could get and everything's going to be fine, for it to not be fine and kind of see your loved one decline, I think is another kind of layer of it all. And yeah, I think kind of after his passing, that came, and just the lack of kind of integrity and dignity that he was unfortunately not allotted from the healthcare system, was really devastating. I think that takes its toll. So I'm passionate about like proper hospice care when able, and things like that, because I think our society kind of, even the doctors within the medical system, kind of are uncomfortable talking about grief and just the dying process. And I'm not one of those like conspiracy theorists. I swear I'm not a cynical person. I mean, that made me a little bit cynical, but I worked in the like as a clinical dietitian for years and knew a lot of these people that actually helped my dad. So I think that made it even worse almost. And it just showed the lack of just knowledge and comfortability with death and how to talk to families and things like that. So that's a passion project that I have to get to. But yeah, I think ultimately for me, the way that I describe it, I make a lot of TikToks when I'm in the mood. It's my grief talk. I've described it of just like the experience kind of just takes out. It's like as if all your organs came out of you and then you were beat up. And then like the only way to like heal and put the organs back is to heal them, to feel your grief, because it's never going to go away. And then you can kind of put your body back together, but you're never going to be the same after losing someone that you love, or in this case kind of like traumatic grief or what have you. So I think for me that was the hardest part, of course, losing him, seeing him decline, but just kind of getting to know a different version of myself. And that's the one thing I would tell anyone who's new to grief. I always say, I'm sorry that you're part of the grief gang, first and foremost. And then, if you've gone through something, I think don't try to go back to who you were, as nostalgic and comforting as it feels like it would be to be who you were, but you've gone through something transformative, and to honor that, until I kind of surrendered to that, I think I struggled even more. And no judgment on like how long it takes you, but I tell like the women who want like have a baby and then want to go back to their pre-baby weight or whatever it is, even if they did go back to their pre-baby body weight, their body is still has done something so transformative. So you're never going to be that person. So that's kind of the metaphor I use, like after losing a loved one and going through something big. It's so now you get to have this different version of you, which doesn't have to be better or worse, but just different. And I think for me, that's been one of the biggest kind of things that have helped me in the process. And some parts you like and others you don't. And, I think I'm maybe a little more jaded and definitely not as naive as I once was, but it kind of breaks your heart open for the good and the bad, I guess. I don't know if I talk too much, so hopefully that sums up. And the reason I didn't dedicate it or call him my dad is because wasn't that kind of guy. And we've been to a ton of mediums and stuff, my sisters and my mom, and we've on multiple occasions have said that he doesn't really like that stuff. He's very happy where he is, and he's only coming through because he knows how much it means to, like, literally different mediums have told us that. So I think it's funny. So that's why I was dedicating it to others. But thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. That was really great. I feel like you have such a good attitude about it, and I can tell you are a death positive person just with the way you speak. And you know, I like how like straightforward you are about the medical field, about them being uncomfortable about speaking about grief. So you really touched on the grief aspect of the course tonight, and I really appreciate it because um yeah, it's a big thing to tackle. And I think the way that you put that, how you said you're never going to go back to the person that you once were before, it's a great message. So thank you so much for sharing that. It's really helpful, and I know it's going to help a lot of people. So thank you for being here. And I like that your dad doesn't want to be I kind of love that in a way. It's really cool that you continue to get that message every time you go to a medium.
Yeah. So I was trying not to call him in for that reason, but yes, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, and I'll just, the last thing I'll say is, it takes a long time, like to I feel like, to get there, and I've done so much of my own, like getting my own support, like, so I don't think anyone needs to sit there and try to, like, everything happens for a reason, or like any of those things,
Yeah,
so to
totally.
honor your journey, I think, is really important.
Yes. Good thing to add. Okay, so we are going to the next panelist. Jessica is with us. Jessica is a friend of mine from high school. We both went to St. Joseph's Academy in St. Louis. And the minute I met her, I knew that she would be in my life for a long time. She has a very goofy personality, yet she's able to go there. And she is the first person that turned me on to what death positive actually means. And she is a filmmaker that has turned into a social worker. And I believe one day she'll like somehow come up with a film on death. Like I can see it in her future. So Jessica, I'm gonna go ahead and pass it over to you. Um, I know that we haven't really prepped or talked about who you're going to speak about tonight or what you're going to be talking about it, but I know that you are very skilled in this topic, so I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
Well, I'm glad you're excited. Can you hear me? I will
Yes.
specifically for you guys. Do you like it? Um, yeah, so I've known Kenzie since I was 13, so almost 20 years. I did not prepare, although I just thought a lot, racked my brain because unfortunately the last 4 years have been for me, in comparison to the first 25, quite filled with death. Professionally and personally. Right now, well, I should say, I will dedicate, or whatever I'm about to speak to, all of the folks whose grief goes unacknowledged. I think that's happens a lot, and people don't also like to talk about it, especially if it's a non-death loss, like an ambiguous loss. And of course, physical death loss is terrible. But I think a lot of us, go through that and don't know how to verbalize it. But I didn't prepare anything. I will say that I am a clinical social worker now, and I'm very grateful for the title of former filmmaker. I'm honored. That didn't work out for me too well in New York City, but it's okay. I right now I'm a clinical social worker in care management, so I actually work with quite a bit of older adults, and so naturally the crossover with death is there. I also worked as a hospice social worker when I moved back to St. Louis about 4 or 5 years ago, and that was can't even make up the things occurred, you know, when that job started for me. I wasn't prepared, but I kind of was. I was ready to receive whatever it was. Like, I wanted to experience it. And I really did want to learn from it, because it was such a, you know, to be that close to death, even if it's not like my personal loved one, right, is kind of incredible, and also an honor, because I mean, this is a person's end of life. Like, the fact that they feel comfortable enough even having me in that setting with them, I take pretty seriously. So, I mean, over the last few years, since both of the other panelists touched on you more the afterlife and then grief, I mean, I think I've had the most experience when I compare all three of those to death. Like sitting vigil with a person who's actively dying. For some reason or other, I keep opening myself up to that experience, and I think it's just I couldn't tell you why I feel the need to, not the need to, but I somehow get, you know, in that world. And it first started with my grandfather, who I was very close with, who got very sick and died of COVID-19 in the hospital, where none of us were able to get in. However, if you recall, I said I was a social worker, so I found a way to get in and snuck in there and stayed in there for as long as I could. And that was pretty rough. He was so out of sorts that when I arrived, he was not chained, but strapped to the bed. Wrists were strapped to the bed down. And so that was very uncomfortable, and had his like iPad and things stolen from him, you know, while he was dying. I mean, I just couldn't comprehend that. And so that, like you said, you know, one of those things, I think it was Michelle that said, up until that point, this grief, you know, this death experience or grief, that was the one that kind of takes you out. And that one was the one that took me out, because I wasn't prepared. And the setting of it, right, in the middle of the very beginning of COVID, everybody was just losing their minds, and nobody knew what was what. And I just felt terribly about the whole situation, because it's not a good death. You want, like, part of being death, you know, positive, or the movement, right, is working on or educating people on a good death, or you know, a good end of life process. And so I feel pretty passionately about that. And I've probably sat vigil with 3 or 4 people now, some longer than others. I know I must get this from my mom, because she insisted on sitting with my aunt. That was almost 2 days. And I was like kind of giving her breaks and whatnot. And I wish I could tell you that there's some sort of, or maybe it's that I'm not seeing it that way, but there's not this spiritual pull or this sense of, you know, wonderment, or, you know, I just never had that. Even when, you know, I'm growing up in Catholic school and talking about religion and talking about spirituality, I just couldn't get there. I guess I just feel that differently, or it comes out in more practical ways. And so yeah, I think though that the idea of like ambiguous loss and non-death loss is interesting, though, because just as much as I've been, you know, really immersing myself in end of life, you know, rituals and or care, the day I learned that my mom had cancer was the day. It was kind of one of those things you can look back in your life and say, okay, my perception has shifted. Something's different within me. And I think it was just the acknowledgement of mortality. And I think I probably reached that at an older age than most, but But I think the acknowledgement of mortality is something that we're all struggling with constantly. And I think that's what you're running into in the healthcare system. Very, very difficult sometimes. Physicians are the worst offenders. They don't learn about death. They learn about how to save a life, and that's it. They're trying to advocate for more education for physicians, but it's so subpar. And those are the people that folks are looking to for answers. And I think, yeah, it can be really, really invalidating and just devastating when they just don't show up in the way that you're looking for them to show up. And so that's a part of why I like doing this type of work, is because I try to show up for people. And I'm not afraid to talk about really anything. Like, a lot of my clients, some are at end of life, and they're not your happy-go-lucky people who are like, I'm looking, I can't wait. It's more like, I want to die. I'm mad I haven't died yet. And the doctors are like shocked. He's like, wow, you're really going to change my view on life. And it's like, you didn't know that sometimes people are ready to go. She keeps saying, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. And that is not something they can compute. Like, that does not compute. Like, and I told my client, I can sit with that. I can sit with that. Like, let's go. That doesn't, I'm not going to call 911 and say I have someone here who's wanting to end their life. Like, what is that intervention going to do for the person? It's not going to do anything. But anyway, I'll just try to wrap it up in saying that I wish you were in St. Louis, Kenzie, because this weekend is I think it's called Last Call. It's an end of life festival in St. Louis. They've been doing it for a couple years. And I saw something really interesting about mediumship. I was like, interesting. And then more about death with dignity in Missouri, about medically assisted death, which is interesting to me. Obviously, that's not legal in Missouri right now. If I had to guess, it might be legal in New York. But anyway, just to wrap up, I mean, I was working very closely with a couple. They didn't have any children. They were both only children. They didn't have siblings, nieces and nephews, none that they were aware of. And they were really in bad health, and weren't able to live on their own. So I was essentially, and one of them has dementia. And so the one that doesn't have dementia, very physically ill. And one of the nicest gentlemen you ever did meet. And we got super close simply from the fact that, like, he had so much work for me to do. And, it's one of those things where when you're working in a professional, role as in this case, a social worker, you have to be mindful of your boundaries and be mindful of, like, be checking in with yourself about how you're feeling, because you might feel, like you're too close, or, things like that. And just, it's just different because you work so close with him, and then you help him through this, get him through rehab and get him all set up with all his oxygen and all of his care needs. And then you get him on hospice. And I never had a chance yet he had a dog. And when we put him on hospice, and then a couple days later, there was a clear shift in his condition, right? What we call like transitioning. And that process can last hours to days. I mean, it really can. And in this circumstance with this man, he was the only person I've sat with who was still completely lucid until about 3 hours before he died. So it was kind of incredible, because I've never seen that before. And of course, this is a man I've been working with for several months. It's not my family member, but we just had a really nice connection. And, he didn't have a lot of people with him. And so as he was transitioning, and I was like, we got to get the dog in here, we got to get the dog in here to see him, and was able to make that happen. And this man was nearly comatose and sprung right out of his bed when that dog got there, and just sat with him. And this dog is his child, right? So even the woman who brought the dog, who is not a close friend, but a friend, she was really taken aback by witnessing that sort of animal human sort of connection, and the fact that like the dog just knew, you know. I can't explain that, but that's what it was. And so essentially we were able to get him all cleaned up. We got him to spend a few hours with the dog, and then that evening he wasn't feeling well, had a lot of respiratory issues, which as a person sitting vigil with someone with those symptoms, that was rough. Because that is hard to sit with, because you want to bring down the burden of those symptoms. And so he was like I got him, like, not intentionally, but got him hooked on chocolate shakes from Shake Shack. So he would like constantly ask me to bring him a Shake Shack shake. And so I had like a back stock of like 4 in his freezer. And I said, well, do you want a little bit of shake? And so, you know, I give him a little bit of the shake or whatever. And he's like, he was just like so excited to have the shake. And I was like, okay, I'm doing the right thing. But then, you know, he was in a facility, not a nursing facility, but an intermediate facility. And they just had not been great about answering the call. But, you know, I said to him, I said, because I had been with him all day at that point, and I said, you know, I think I'm going to get going and, you know, get things. And he kind of paused and essentially, like, without words, kind of expressed, you know, he just expressed gratitude. And, you know, but then at the same time, you know, I said, you're going to feel okay by yourself? And he didn't have that convincing of an answer. So I said, okay, let me go home, clean myself up, change, and get something to eat, and I'll be back. Because I thought we were close. Like, I figured we were pretty close. And so came back, and of course through the night, called for medication, right? Because he's on hospital. I called for the medication, and 20 minutes goes by, 30 minutes goes by, nobody's coming. And so I go around, I look for somebody, and of course I find the one person asleep on the couch. I'm like, girlfriend, I need some help here. If I could administer the morphine, I would, but I can't. So that happened 3 times throughout the night. So I thought, okay, good move. I definitely should have come back. And I just sat with him. I held his hand from time to time and told him, I'm here, you know. And I think it was about like 7 in the morning, the sun was just coming up, and that was his last breath. So it's still kind of fresh. And then it became the point of, how do we tell his wife, right, who has dementia? Like, what is that going to look like? And whew, that was rough too. They just kind of plopped her in front of him, which was not my choice. And it was like seeing a soul leave a body. So yep. And I still get upset about it, because for various reasons, but I think people shy away from being there during that active process, because it can be ugly. It's not fun, but like, it is a transitional process. And I think some people are really scared and they don't know how to say it. So anyway,
Wow, Jessica, that was so great.
yeah, so that was just like a month ago. So pardon me, because I'm still writing his obituary, because again, you know, it's a really involved situation. So, you know, I'll just say one last thing, because I think it's cool. I couldn't find any photos of them. Like, they didn't keep photos. They had tons of artwork and all this stuff, but like no like pictures like of each other, like on vacation or anything like that. And so I reached out to his one of the college he went to ask about his degree, because I thought he said he didn't get it. And so one of the archivists found a picture of him when he was 20 years old. So they sent it to me, and I'm going to include it in the obituary, and hopefully do some sort of celebration at some point for the few people that were involved. So, you know, I thought that was cool.
That's super cool. And you really are an angel of death, like Stephen Jenkinson says, because you have this outlook that you're like, I'm not feeling anything spiritual, but I know that the whisper of death is coming for all of us, and none of us are going to get out of here alive. and your approach is a little bit different than Nick's and Michelle's, but it's equally important. And I'm really happy that you spoke about death, because tonight we were able to hear stories from the afterlife, grief, and death and dying, and touch on all four parts of this course that's called It's Not Really Over. So we're going to go ahead and conclude the panel. What I'm going to do next is just a couple different things. So I know that a few of you are in St. Louis. Michelle is on the East Coast like me in New Jersey, but I am having this party and you're all invited. I hope that you could all come, but if not, you'll be there in spirit. And so I'm going to share my screen right now and show you what this party is. It's called Dance for the Departed, and it's a party that I came up with while on the dance floor. I have lost all four of my grandparents, probably like Michelle and Jessica. I don't know. If you still have your grandparents alive, that's incredible. But I lost mine pretty young and really didn't have a relationship with one of them in particular. That is my paternal grandfather. His name is Joe. He was an alcoholic and died at 76. He actually died in the rocking chair that I was rocked in. So, when I moved to New York, Jessica actually was still living in New York at the time. I was living in Brooklyn. She was living in Manhattan. She got me set up in my dorm room. And I remember really enjoyed Brooklyn. I'm back here now. And I went to a thrift store. And when I was at the thrift store, it was in Williamsburg where this party's going to be. Some woman who owns the thrift store came up to me and she said, "Can I please do Reiki on you?" And at the time, I had no idea what Reiki was. This was 2015. I feel like Reiki was definitely a thing. It's a Japanese practice, but I had no idea. Coming from Missouri, I had never heard of Reiki. So she went ahead and did Reiki on me. And that day in particular, I bought this dress that really reminded me of Joe's only wife, who is Virginia, who has passed away on this day 21 years ago. So anyway, I have been in New York for over 8 years at this point, and it wasn't until I moved to New York that I started to actually feel communication from the other side with all four of my grandparents. And each of them have come down from the spirit world, sent me messages that are very, very personal to the relationship we had on the earthly realm. And so there's been times when I've been out dancing that I've had people approach me and say, "Can I tell you a message? There's somebody here. Somebody wants to talk to you." And that's happened with Joe. And it's interesting. So I was at this new club. It's called Gabriella. It's a club in honor of a dearly departed friend. It's in Williamsburg. And I know one of the owners pretty well. I used to work at another business that he owns, Cafe Mogador. It's a wonderful restaurant. And, we were sitting talking, and I was looking at the logo of the club, and I understood that was Gabriella, the woman who had passed, their friend, and that was her face. And I said, "Hey, let's do something. I really feel called to get a group of people together and celebrate this sacred part of life, which is death, because our society shies away from it." And Jessica and Michelle brought that up. And even in Nick's story, I think you hear a sentiment where it's like that you have a number, and that is kind of just the reminder that we're all going to die at one point, and we get together for weddings and baby showers and all this stuff, but when have we ever really gotten together to celebrate something like death? And what Jessica's going to this weekend called Last Call it's probably around in the same vein, but this is Dance for the Departed. It's going to be on October 30th at Gabriella, and it's a community event. Therefore, it's free, open to the public, non-ticketed. The doors will be at 8 and it will go until 2 in the morning. So we will be dancing for those that have departed on the eve of Halloween, which I find really cool because we all know that Halloween is when the veil is pretty thin. So I really do feel like people are gonna come together and really have a prolific night on the dance floor. So I really hope that you all can be there. I know Jessica's an incredible dancer, and I'm sure Michelle and Nick are as well. But before we get off the call, and I have a special thing at the very end, if you were to come to the Dance for the Departed party, who would you dance for? And I'll go first. I'm gonna dance for Virginia because today was the day that she took her last breath after battling breast cancer. But you can rattle off the person that you talked about tonight, or maybe somebody else that you knew that you couldn't touch on today. So Jessica, I'm gonna pass it to you because you went last. So you're gonna go first, and Nick will go last.
I would definitely dance for my friend Natalie, who dance, and her number came up way too damn soon. So, and she loves New York and everything about it. So that would be for her. Hopefully she'd get a giggle out of it.
Yeah, Natalie, I knew Natalie through Jessica. She was a character and someone that you could never forget. Michelle, what about you?
I would dance for my dad, my Nana, my grandma, and my Aunt Loretta and my Uncle John.
I love that. That's an army of angels. Nick, what about you?
Definitely for my wife Idris and for my dad, because he liked to dance, get out there at wedding receptions and, kick those heels up.
Yes, so dance is a somatic-based ritual that helps people move through traumatic memories and situations like grief. So actually, when you're dancing, you're healing and you're moving through trauma. So I'm a trauma-informed astrologer, and of course, I'm going to talk a little bit about astrology towards the end. We have about 10 minutes left. So really, I think the reason why I'm going to say that is because I know for a fact my grandpa on my mom's side like wants me to do this. I just have an inner knowing. He was the one that really guided me to the books by Sylvia Brown about the afterlife. She was a psychic medium from Kansas City, Missouri. And when Fitz died, I really didn't understand why that happened. I just couldn't believe that whole thing. It was just terrible to watch my sister lose a baby and then see my nieces who were so young, Lucy and Winnie, talk about, well, he died and all this stuff. It was really difficult. So I started to get curious about what my grandpa Jack was curious about when he lost his wife, which is my maternal grandmother, Beverly. And when she was on her deathbed and she happened to die on my birthday, he kept telling her, look for the light. And so, I didn't really understand that and thought it was silly when I was young. I was 11 when she died. But then when I finally went to Grandpa Jack's books, I read the books from Sylvia Brown. I understood what he meant. And so we are just coming out of a really fated event in astrology. It's called a lunar eclipse. It's a full moon times 10, and it happened yesterday night, and it was in the sign of Pisces. And the last time there was a lunar eclipse or an eclipse in Pisces. It was and really there's a thing called the North Node in astrology, and the last time there was an eclipse in Pisces and the North Node was in Pisces was in 2007, and that is when my grandpa Jack passed away from prostate cancer. 2 weeks after he passed away, there was this eclipse in Pisces, and he was a Pisces. So I do believe that he's wanting to come forward, and a hypnotherapist of mine has been talking about this one author who talks about the womb space, and the womb space for women and men, how it's a place where we create, but also where we destroy things. And he brought up this one interesting thing about how for men that develop prostate cancer, it's because they had to kill like their dreams. And I really believe that my grandpa Jack, he sold life insurance, and he was a child of the Great Depression. He was born in 1919. He went down the path of like working a 9 to 5, but I think his true passion was helping people. He used to go to Old Country Buffet when he would come to town, and he'd say, "Hey, just leave me here and pick me up in a couple hours, like I'll be fine." And he would walk around the restaurant and talk with people. And really, like, I feel like there's an extension of him coming through my work. I feel like all four of my grandparents come through my work. So yeah, I just wanted to share what we're experiencing collectively. So if you saw a little bit of a red tint to the moon, that's what an eclipse does. It was a partial eclipse. But what Pisces is, it's a water sign. It's the 12th and final sign of the zodiac. It's very wise. There's a lot of spirituality there. It knows that there's an interconnectedness, and that, there's no life without death, no death without life. And so being a water sign, I have been in the mood to watch Titanic quite a bit this week. And to end this call, I'm going to show you the last clip of the movie. It was in 1997 when this was released. And I think it's a beautiful reminder that it's not really over, which is the title of this course. And it might make you get the itch to watch Titanic this week. But before I show the clip, I just want to say thank you so much, Jessica, Michelle, and Nick, for joining today. Your stories really touched not only me, but the people that will listen once this is live. And you are very brave, and you're a beacon of light for people that are new to grieving, new to death and dying, or new to learning about the afterlife. So you should really be proud of yourself, and keep doing the work, keep spreading your stories, because they really do help people.